Miami-Dade goes red as Florida county's voter turnout is far better for GOP than Democrats. Governor Ron DeSantis defeated Congressman Charlie Crist by 19 points Tuesday night. It was the biggest win for a Republican governor since the end of Reconstruction. For the first time in recent history, there were more registered Republicans than Democrats across the state. The big difference, however, was only about half of the Democrats showed up on Tuesday, and around 2/3 of the Republicans voted. DeSantis flipped counties President Joe Biden won in 2020, namely Miami-Dade, Palm Beach, Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Duval. One major problem for Democrats was a mismatch in turnout. Republican registered voters showed up, and Democrats did not. According to unofficial results posted online by Florida's supervisors of elections, in Miami-Dade County, there are 135,229 more registered Democrats than Republicans, but more Republicans showed up. 61% of registered Republicans voted, and only 46% of registered Democrats. There are 106,299 more registered Democrats than Republicans in Palm Beach County. 55% of registered Democrats showed up, and 66% of Republicans showed up. Broward, the Blue Island, only had 47.94% turnout. Democrats will have to show more resilience, dedication, and a sense of responsibility towards this and every election in order to stay strong and viable in the political and social arena. That is the only way they get their voice heard, especially the LGBTQ+ community. We'll have to accept this fact. Yeah. And it really all comes down to turnout.
It really does.
Look, the pundits were predicting a red wave that did not materialize across the United States. It all happened here in Florida, and it all came down to turnout. If we, as a community, showed up to vote, if Democrats had showed up to vote in Florida in the numbers that we were showing, that Democrats were showing up in other parts of the United States, or even, matching Republicans, we would have very different looking state legislature.
Well, I mean, the elections are just so ridiculous. I mean, it's 2022 and we're still voting with a piece of paper and a pencil, for God's sakes. It's like, why can't people be able to vote on the go? Get an app where you register to vote, you get a PIN number that can only be used once, you put it in the app, and then you see all the photos of the candidates, and you just tap whichever one you want. And then, it tallies up in real time, and everybody can watch the results in real time, and we don't have to wait a freaking week to see.
You can't use a pencil. You have to use a blue or black ink.
Well, whatever.
Your vote didn't count. You pencil pushing people, your votes didn't count.
He's busy.
I now blame you.
He wants his yogurt to go and his vote to go.
I totally get, making it more convenient for voters. I get that. But, I just say, Democrats, we can't give up. I've been there where I just wanted to throw my hands up in the air and say, oh, what's the use? But I remind myself that there was a time that women couldn't vote. There was a time that people of color couldn't vote. So, people died for the right for us to be able to vote. And so I constantly remind myself of that. It's just important. We have to go and vote. And even if you don't want to go, you can do absentee. I mean, some people don't feel comfortable with that, but I'm saying, there is another option.
There's parts of this, so for sure, the turnout is a big problem, and it has historically been for Florida and so many other parts of the U.S. South, and for, but there's, and for certainly the rest of the country, but there's, I also feel like the Democratic Party has to have a more inspired candidate selection choice. That there are problems here too about responding to what the people want. This story in some ways I think could be a little misleading in other ways, because one of the things we just simply have to acknowledge is that the state is turning red, right? No doubt, and Miami-Dade County no doubt turned red along with other counties. And those numbers, for example, don't include the independent voters, of which there are many who certainly went Republican, right? There was something that couldn't carry, right, in South Florida, in parts of South Florida, and throughout the state, and it's the red wave hit Florida really hard. Like,
I think everybody from Massachusetts should move to Florida.
Yeah, well,
Well, you know,
Eastern Massachusetts anyway. Now, but a couple things that I want to talk to you about turnout. And you might have seen more numbers from across the country, but maybe this just speaks to Florida's uniqueness of its participation in democracy. But if you told me that 50% of Democrats in Broward, or 50% of Democrats anywhere were going to come out, or 45% of Democrats in a county were going to come out in a midterm election, I would be like, we've got turnout solved. That's a really strong number. But in Florida, it is not. Republicans were very motivated, and they came out. Second of all, and just give me one moment, this trend, and let's say what it is, it's the Cuban population of Miami that has really shifted the demographic. And we've been seeing this. Hillary Clinton, I think, carried Miami-Dade by like 16 points. And then Biden won it by 8 a couple years ago. But Senator Bill Nelson, ignored the Hispanic community in Miami, did not come down here, did not campaign in 2018. He lost his seat, and we saw the gap close. And then we saw it close down to 8 points 2 years ago. So to see this shouldn't really surprise anybody, perhaps the magnitude of it, but to see the trend, it's really just completing what's been going on for at least 4 election cycles now. And Raji, I'm sorry, you had something?
No. Two things came to mind. Do you think gerrymandering had anything to do with it in our state? Because, you know, there was like territories that were changed.
I don't think so, because the governor is a statewide vote.
Yeah.
There's no gerrymandering.
Right.
That. You know, attorney general, they all won by between 15 and 20%. All the statewide elections were won by 15 to 20%.
I was thinking about Demings because I liked Val Demings, but anyway, I voted for her. But yeah, and then the other thing is too, I don't know, like the Republicans, they find a way to connect communism to the Democratic Party, and that's why so many Cubans, I think, lean towards the Republican Party.
Well, look, sure, they do red baiting all the time. Sorry to interrupt, but like the red baiting it hits hard with the South Florida community for a lot of different reasons. And I think it's one of those things where the elections often, we always look to South Florida, we always look to Florida, and yet we make such little effort to try to understand the culture, the politics, the society here, the economics here. I think in many ways, it's no doubt the Cuban community and the Cuban American community, you know, we have to really understand what's going on there, and they are increasingly moving back to because I mean we had seen a lot of evidence that they were becoming more moderate, and the evidence for this one suggests something very different. But it's a Latinx vote, and it's
the Venezuelans too.
It's a lot of communities that are often have similar shared histories of anti-communism that get red bait. That is, like, it's not to overcomplicate, but that there's a lot of layers here and very little effort to try to understand what's going on.
Well, let me ask, why do they reject communism? And rightly so. It's a terrible economic philosophy, but they reject that. But in doing so, they embrace the authoritarianism that is now prevalent from Trump and all the mega MAGAs.
That's the $1 million question. Because I'm like, you're voting for someone that was similar to like the leaders in your country, Castro and the leader over in Venezuela.
Yeah.
You know, it's the irony in that.
You can't undersell the work that the Florida Republican Party is doing in the state of Florida.
Right.
They are in those communities. They are talking to community leaders. They are figuring out how to message effectively. That is something that Democrats in the state of Florida just aren't doing effectively. Right. Part of that is because, you know, there's a benefit to being in power for going to be 28 years now, which the Florida Republican Party has. You get a lot of money from that. It's easier to raise money. You know, Charlie Crist, one of his issues was that for every one ad he was able to put up on the air, DeSantis was running 20 ads.
Yeah.
If you can't get your message out there, you're not going to be able to reach the independents that are persuadable. The other thing is that the Florida Democratic Party needs to invest in voter registration in off years. That was one thing when Barack Obama turned Florida blue in 2008. The campaign camped here in Florida for a year doing voter registration. My very first job out of college was being a field organizer on Barack Obama's 2008 campaign. My office was in Lake City, Florida.
Oh, the glamour assignment.
Can you imagine Democrats having a campaign office in Lake City, Florida? That's the kind of thing. We need to go everywhere. We need to go talk to everyone if you want to win elections. And, you know,
I'm getting goose pimples thinking about that time.
Yeah.
Because it was just such a energy. There were people that went out to the polls that had never even voted before. That was amazing. And I think that's we need a candidate like that too. You referred to Charlie Crist. If we had a candidate that was bringing that type of energy, maybe more Democrats would have went out to the polls.
Yeah.
Who knows?
All right, let's.
We could talk about this forever. Politics.
I've got Taste of the Manor tickets, so we got to get this rig rolling. Let's go.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out Television Network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ plus community.